Hi, I'm Ralph Preston, and here we are again, Tuesday at 11 a.m., talking stroke recovery. And today, Lisa Pyanoe has joined us for a second time. Lisa did a great program on stroke coaching and a few months ago, and I knew I liked her all along. But recently, she posted something on uh, working with your arm, and she made a sling. The specific exercise and what she did aren't relevant, but what she did was she took a couple of kerchiefs and she put them on, I think, coat hooks on the hall or something, and pushed the table
Band.
over there, and
Yeah.
and she channeled her inner MacGyver, for lack of a better word, and that's a very valuable thing to be able to do. And I took one look at that and I said, all right, another reason to like Lisa Pyanoe. And the other thing, almost immediately, I said, I think Lisa and I ought to do something on adapting, because I'm a real adapter. And so I added also, finding solutions to the title, because that's part of adapting. And people who don't adapt tend to they look at a video and they see something specific that they don't have, or they watch somebody post a video in one of the groups doing something they don't have, or they don't know what to do at home, well, because they don't have all the fancy equipment that they have at rehab, and they get stuck. And the point of this meeting would be to teach you a few maybe specific things that you can do. But what we're really trying to do is teach kind of a mindset about, don't allow yourself to get stuck.
Mhm.
So, Lisa, you were talking about all the equipment that we often have at rehab and how we don't have it at home. I believe you've
Mhm.
also made home visits and things in your 30-year career as an occupational therapist. So maybe
Mhm.
you could talk a little bit about your experience with adapting and how you got to be a MacGyver, because I was really impressed with that. I said, this is great. That's something I would do. So
Yeah.
thank
Well,
you.
as an occupational therapist, that's what we do is we adapt. So, I've been trained in it. I've been doing it for years and years. And it is, I think, it is a mindset of breaking. There's two areas when I think of adaptation, and adaptation is really changing to better suit the situation. So it doesn't necessarily mean you like the situation you're in. When you take stroke survivors, one day you're fully functional, and the next day you may be in bed, not able to get out of bed. And so, how do you make that situation better? And, adaptation, I think, is a complex process, and we can talk more about it. But I think, there's kind of two ways of looking at how can you make a situation better, or as you said, how can you move forward? How can you do something you want to do, but you're stuck? You don't know how to do it. And that's where adaptation comes into play. And I think of, as I had mentioned a little bit earlier, I think the initial part of adaptation um, is a two-part question. One is problem solving. How can I ensure my success at the activity? So if you're stuck in doing it and not being able to do an activity, how can you ensure your success that it gets done? And we can definitely share some examples at that. Because, well, let me go on. And then the other part is, how can I break the activity down into manageable steps? So, and as an adult, I don't think typically we think like that. When we're faced with an obstacle, we may do a little problem solving, but we easily tend to give up. And as a stroke survivor, when you're faced with constant struggles, I'm sure a lot of you are day to day with doing things, you know, it's an overwhelming process, and we're not taught to break activities down, um, and how to cope with limitations. So it is a mindset. And if we can look at today, I think the basics of what does adaptation mean? How can I make the situation better through problem solving and breaking that activity down so it empowers you to move forward? And I
Right.
think I think those are the two main simple things to look at. And when you think of problem solving, you're thinking outside of the box. Because again, if you're used to problem solving, we get stuck in, well, this is how I deal with it. But if you keep dealing with it the same way and nothing changes, well, then you have to change how you deal with it. And that may look different. It may look different for the functional you versus the limited you, or the new you, or whatever you want to call it. So really thinking outside of the box is crucial in terms of how can I solve this problem. And to give you an example, um, oh, I know one thing is I was interacting with somebody on Facebook, and they were saying, well, how do you wrap a gift one-handed? And people were giving their input on that, and, talking about how frustrating it is. And I thought, well, and I typed back and I said, why don't you just use a gift bag? That's one way to deal with it. You don't have to go through the struggle of trying to figure out how to do it one-handed, or, it can be that simple. Or another example, if you keep tripping over a rug, you know,
Move it.
toss it. Or you can even, if you can't, or if you want that rug and you don't want to move it, get that double-sided tape. They have double-sided tape, and tape it down. Or you can get a heavier rug. Or maybe you can go around it and get to where you're going a different way. Or maybe you can, when you get there, consciously make the effort to pick up the walker and watch your feet. So, when you're talking about problem solving, there's no one way to
Right.
solve it. It's a matter of what works for you, what you're willing to do. So,
Well, and yeah, and you just mentioned 4 or 5 solutions to one simple problem.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
so yeah, that it's always problem solving's key, and breaking things down is I found it to be key. I've got a short little story, which is basically that being a guy, and my stroke was caused by guy thinking, but that's a whole nother story. We think we're bulletproof and invincible and everything, and don't have to obey all the rules like taking blood pressure pills. Although, look, I shouldn't leave you with the concept that I was like completely ignoring a problem I had. I was dealing with it naturally, and I had dropped 20 pounds and 20 points off my blood pressure. So I thought I was on the right track, although I wasn't. But anyway, I applied some more guy thinking shortly after my stroke, and that was like somebody would show me something, and I was convinced I had to do it perfectly, like the exercises I saw on the sheets that
yeah,
they'd give me, or the exercises from PT. I'd go home and I'd get so frustrated because I couldn't necessarily do the whole thing. Not only did I want to do the whole thing, but I wanted to do it perfect. And you know, it's all you can do to get out of a wheelchair. You're not going to, to do a sit-to stand. It's not exact. You're not exactly in a position to do everything perfectly.
exactly.
And I didn't really learn that. I spent a whole year doing that. Well, but it worked out somehow. You had these glasses or various things. When I put them down, I didn't like the way I put them down, so I'd pick them up again, put them down again, pick them up again, put it down again, over and over. So I got through it with persistence, but I would have been a lot better off, and everyone would be a lot better off to learn how to break things down into their parts and put it back together again later when you get stronger. There's two reasons for that. Number one, you can a lot of times things are real complicated. For example, I did this one time. A therapist wanted me to take my affected leg, stand on the ground on a squishy pad,
Mhm.
not holding on to anything, take my affected leg, put it up on the first step, step up with the affected leg, take the unaffected leg, put it up on the next step, and hover it. Hold it there for a second, and then go all the way back down to the ground. He said, when you can do that, you won't have any hip dip. And he was right. And so I tried to do it in physical therapy. This was just 2 years ago, 12 years out. I took a big chance right in front of him. Anyway, like I wasn't really able to do it very well. And I said, well, wait a minute, let me try something here. He said, okay, because I talked to him about what I do and adapting and helping others and all that. So what
Mhm.
I did was I broke it down. At first, I did like 10 of them where I just stepped up and lifted my foot up. Then
Yeah.
I stepped up and I put my foot up on the next step and I couldn't hover it. So I just put the tip of my toe down.
Yeah.
I did that 10 times. And then I turned to him and said, okay, watch this. I can't believe I did this, but I did and worked out because I actually did 8 out of 10 of them. I couldn't
Wow.
I couldn't do a one. I practiced and patterned my brain for about
Yeah.
2 minutes doing two different sets, and then bingo, I was able to put it all together. Of course, I came home and I did about four instead of eight, but that's probably because I didn't have the pressure on. But the point is, there are a lot of times where you can learn part of or teach your body in this case, because what it was a lot of things to ask all at once. First of all, you're learning the whole sequence.
Right.
Second of all, you got weak body parts that don't necessarily want to cooperate with you. And so it's just a good way. I didn't get into adapting in my own recovery, actually discovered it when I started being a pseudo physical therapist and working with people in person. I felt so bad for them if they couldn't do something. I figured out a way to break it down.
Right. And
Also,
that, and really that's the key, is to break it down so into manageable, successful steps. You want to be successful in your steps. And if you're not, then you need to think about, okay, I need to break that down even further so I am successful, because then you have success build on success and you feel better and you're motivated, and it builds strength and work toward accomplishing. Yeah. So yeah. And and the thing is too, Ralph, like I said before, I don't think we naturally think of breaking things down, because either as adults we can do it or we can't. And you know, what that may involve sometimes is thinking about, okay, I want to be able to feed myself, say, with my affected hand. And and that this may sound kind of crazy, but I think it may work, is if you think, if there was an alien here who didn't know how to eat. I mean, we know what eating is, we've done it all our lives, but if there was an alien here, what's the first step you would tell that alien? Well, you would tell them that you need to use your hand and grasp the utensil, right? But if you can't grasp the utensil, what can you grasp? Well, maybe you can grasp a big biscuit, and and then you tell the alien, then you bring it to your mouth. Well, if you can't get it to your mouth, what can you do to get it there? And that may involve, helping that hand up to take a bite of that biscuit. So I kind of, I think that may be one way to look at how to break down an activity is, looking at the alien thing. And I hear a lot of people say too, their goal is, I want to walk. And that's, that's a valid goal. But if you can't even stand, how are you going to walk? So, again, if an alien was here, you would tell them, well, you have to be able to get up out of your seat. And what are the steps involved in that? So you can, you know, if you begin thinking like that, it just kind of helps you break that activity down in the steps that are required. So hopefully if that makes sense to you guys. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it did. Well, plus we're used to, this isn't a foreign concept. For some reason, people have more trouble with it with their upper extremities, their arm and shoulder and hands. Because if you think about it, it's not really a foreign concept when we learn how to walk. I mean, I don't know about other people, but I worked on my ankle, my knee, my hip, upper leg strength, my hips. I worked on all four parts of walking, and I probably, well, in my Walking Better playlist, I think I have 22 videos of 22 different exercises you can do. And so, there's, well, you can mix that all up all kinds of different ways. But that's something that we seem to be more used to doing in terms of walking, accepting that, okay, well, I'm not walking perfectly, but I'm going to keep walking, and I'm not doing a good heel strike, so I'll do plantar and dorsiflexion and ankle rotation and eversion and things to build up that ankle because I'm not happy with it. So but that whole concept can be applied to that, like the example I gave of a step up. It can also be applied
Right.
to washing,
Anything, yeah.
washing dishes. I was
Yeah.
trying to find something when you were talking. It would very much reminded me of what Bob Anderson wrote. Uh, if you can't do this, then do that. He started like, trying to put something in your mouth with your affected hand. Can you touch your Okay, well, next try touching your nose, then try touching your forehead. Put your hand behind, I should be doing this with my affected hand, shouldn't I? Put your hand behind on your neck. So, if you can't do something now, like put your hand all the way to your neck, you can also build up to it.
Build
So
up. Yeah.
that's another, it's a nuance, but it's a slight variation on breaking it down. It could be, going further and further and further and
Right.
building up the capabilities. So that's like I said, slightly different version of breaking things down. But I'm getting back to the mindset because that's really what's important here.
Mm.
You know, I can show you an exercise and you can do it over and over for the rest of your life. And after about 3 weeks, it won't do you any good whatsoever because your brain will get used to it. And Lisa's nodding her head because she knows it's another meeting, but mixing it up and how the brain forms the blueprint is important, right, Dr. Hetzler? You got to play into it.
Well, that's right. Also, another term you could use for adaptation is shaping. That is,
Oh, yes.
shaping successively close approximations to
Yes.
the final desired behavior. That's the way in the laboratory we train a rat to press a bar. A rat isn't born knowing how to press a bar, but you can shape it. You can reinforce successively close approximations to that.
Right.
Right,
And
right.
that's what stroke recovery is the relearning how to do things or, retraining those muscles. But in a sense, it's relearning how to, walk and do things. And
But you're really retraining the brain.
exactly,
The muscles know how to
exactly.
do it, the brain just doesn't know how to control it anymore.
Right.
Yeah. And and building the strength up in the muscles
Yes.
to do it.
Well, it's funny because, one of the things that happens to, I don't know, 30–40% of people is they'll yawn and their affected arm. Mine would go all the way up like that, full extension. It took me 15 months. I was doing my hands in about 3 or 4 months. I was walking pretty well inside of 6, but it took 15 months to get my shoulder back. But like from day one, sitting at home on day one, I would yawn, and my hand would go all the way up. It's a reflex, and it would come back down, and I couldn't get my hand out of my lap. Once it came back down, I would just try, but I didn't have the connection. So that your arm, the one thing that I knew nothing about PT or neuroplasticity, neurology, any of this stuff, because I was like all the rest of you. They sent me home to reinvent the wheel for myself too. But uh, so anyway, I couldn't do anything with it, and I couldn't harness it. I thought maybe some way I can harness this by, like, when it started to come down, like try and hold it up there.
Yeah.
Tried holding it up with my other hand. It just got,
Yeah.
there wasn't much. It's apparently a reflex, and I've seen a number of people report that. What's up with this, thing with my hand drifting up? Well, it's a reflex. Nobody I know has been able to harness it. Wouldn't that be great if we could harness reflexes? But we can't. So, oh, by the way, I should have said this earlier. Anybody who's got a question or anything to add, just, this is a discussion. Sometimes we have people who do like little, Dr. Hetzler typically does a little PowerPoint presentation, then we take the questions after, but this is a discussion. So if you got any tricks you learned in adapting or in your recovery, or want to say anything, chime in.
Right. Yeah.
Otherwise, Lisa and I are going to have to talk.
Oh.
We know how to talk, don't worry, but, this is I always learn something in these meetings, but I basically have them for the other stroke survivors. I mean, I'm not saying I don't get anything out of them, particularly if that would be, I don't mean that I'm not getting anything out of this, but like Dr. Hetzler, sometimes Lisa has presented on neuroplasticity and spasticity, and not being an educated physical therapist or neurologist or anything, or neuroscientist, I learn a lot. I always learn something, but the point of these Tuesday meetings is to impart the knowledge of people like Lisa and maybe me to all of you to use in your recovery. So,
Right. And I learn a lot from hearing other people too, and how they've adapted and how they've solved different issues. And so, yeah, it's a good sharing of information and good sharing of knowledge.
yeah, one
So,
thing they told me in actually is my OT, not my PT, was what you mentioned before: get a gift bag or whatever. They were talking about there's two different types of things you can do. One is like applying your cognitive skills, like don't try and wrap it. Um,
um,
get a gift bag versus like training your cognitive skills to rewrap it again. I'm a big believer in both. I worry a little bit about people who just always take the way around the rug, walk around the rug,
right.
because at some point, well, I do anyway. I resist a lot of times when people talk about adaptive things because they're really good for sharing. But in the back of my mind, I usually have like, don't you want to learn how to handle the Scotch tape and fold it over
Right.
and wrap a package the way you used to? And of course, the answer for everybody's yes, I do. So
Right.
you got to
Or
be.
it's different, I think that's the complicated thing about what can make adaptation difficult, is because you're not only looking at physical responses, but you're looking at emotional and mental responses. It may be, if you expend a lot of energy during the day and trying to do things, and so you have to decide what's important to me and what's not. And maybe I don't want to expend all this energy, to wrap a gift when I can put it in a gift bag. But then other people, it may be like, yeah, that's good therapy for me. So I will expend that energy. And another example I was thinking of too is like with, feeding yourself. um some people, if you can't feed yourself with your affected arm and say it's your dominant arm, then they just will do it with their unaffected because it's easier, it's quicker. But, you know, if you want to be able to do it, and if it's good therapy for you, the repetitive motion is wonderful, but yes, it is frustrating. So you have to figure out, well, you know, how much effort do I want to put into this? And maybe it's like, okay, maybe I'll feed myself with my affected arm and struggle with it, but do it 25% of the time. Or maybe next time or at lunchtime, I'll try and do it 50% of the time. So it's a judgment call, how much you want to put into it, what it's worth to you. And then if you like don't want to look dysfunctional, or if you don't want to look like you're struggling, or if you don't want to look like you're making a mess during family dinner time, then maybe just eat with your unaffected hand during family dinner time, but during breakfast and lunch, use your affected hand. So it's, you know, there's that whole idea of expectation and effort and conformity, you know what I'm saying, that plays into your decisions to adapt or let it go.
Well, I mean, this is broader than just adapting, but I think one of the most difficult things in stroke recovery is knowing when to make that decision. Like, okay, I'm not going to walk around this rug anymore. I'm not going to use the cognitive. I want to learn how to walk over that rug, or anything like that. We get in ruts. We do it with exercises too sometimes. You know, important skill is knowing when it's time to, you know, if you really don't have the leg strength, then you're going to trip over that rug, you know, every day, then walk around it. But in the back, I mean, at least in my mind, in the back of my mind, whenever I had to adapt something cognitively like that, I said to myself, what are the things that I need to be working on so that I don't have to apply this, you know, cognitive reasoning to walk around the rug. So if I was like having trouble with the rug, I'd work on leg lifts and squats and things that gave me upper leg strength to pick the darn leg up so you don't trip on it.
Right.
This is a little aside, but I'm going to do a post on this. I'm calling it my gravity post. Don't mess with gravity. And there are a number of things. Basically, the number one thing, and there are about like 5 or 10 of them that I can come up with, is don't do anything when you're walking. Okay, I thought about this because of the rug. The other night I have an Apple Watch, and I set a timer for the whatever I was cooking in the kitchen, and it went off. And I was just moseying back to the kitchen, not paying attention to anything. Well, I was paying attention. Then I decided I'd turn off the alarm because it's buzzing on my wrist and bugging me. And so I chose to do that right as I stepped over the rug and I caught my foot on the rug. So I say you don't drink when you're walking, you don't take your t-shirt off or put one on, you don't take pills. I sit down to do most everything. I got really good balance. You could try and push me over and you probably can't, but I find that we're really visually dependent on for balance after stroke. If you take away the visual component with a stroke survivor, they're going to have more problems than somebody who didn't have a stroke.
Well, anyone has more trouble if they aren't using their eyes.
Right.
Your vision is your dominant sense. And there's a classic paper called Vision Controls Touch. So if you are looking at something and it looks curved because of the special glasses you're wearing, even though it's straight, if you run your hand across it so it feels straight but it looks curved, it will feel curved. What you see will determine what you feel.
Right.
So vision is important for almost everything.
Well,
Another thing, Ralph, you mentioned don't mess with gravity. Gravity is not just a good idea; it's a law.
right. Right. Well, I
That's
said a
good.
while back, I don't know, when I was 60 or so, about 10 years ago, I said, I'm done messing with gravity. I'm not going on any roller coasters. I'm not going to, like, try and walk any tight ropes or do anything that, because guess what? Because gravity is the law, Dr. Hetzler, it usually wins,
Oh,
especially
yes. When I
especially if you ignore it and ignore the law, you're going to lose.
Yeah.
That is true. When I was teaching and dropped chalk on the floor or something, I would say, gravity, not just a good idea, it's a law.
That's good.
Well, and I find that verticals and horizontals, I think that's what we really like for balance when we're walking or something. If you start to go one way or another, all the verticals in the room are now, not going straight up. So they're a real cue. But I didn't mean to. I just thought about that because of the rug. Because basically, I think you should unless you're really doing well, and I'm doing pretty well, and occasionally I do this, but mostly I do one thing at a time. So if I'm taking pills, I'm not going to walk. If I'm drinking, I'm not going to walk. If I got to take pills, I'll sit down, take the pills, grab a glass of water, take a drink, stand back up. Uh, it's kind of
Well,
like,
you may not know, but multitasking is a myth.
right,
People really cannot multitask. If you
no,
want to do something well, you do it one at a time.
right. I used to watch this great show on Nat Geo called Brain Games. You were talking about vision before. They did a thing with like styrofoam cups and dishes, and they'd tell you that they were coming at you, and you would see them that way. Then they would tell you, okay, look again. They're actually going the other way. And once you looked at them and saw them that way, you couldn't make them come at you anymore. Because they actually were doing that. So in the beginning, another thing they did was they spun this 3D image of a face, like a plaster cast, and you couldn't tell whether the nose was going in or out as it spun around. The brain takes a lot of shortcuts if it can, because it has so much information to process. I believe you are the neuroscientist, but I believe I read somewhere that the eyes take up 30 to 40% of all brain processing.
Well, it's vision does, not eyes
But
per
no,
se.
vision. That's what I
Yeah.
meant. The whole
Yeah,
occipital
a
lobe.
lot of your cerebral cortex is involved in visual processing.
Right. It was brain processing, not eyes. I
Yeah.
said eyes. 20, 30, 40%. A significant portion of all the
Yes,
processing you do is visual processing.
yes.
Um, So, I mean, back to our discussion, the point here would be to, somehow, how do you teach attitude? That's a thing, Lisa. I'm sure you've thought about this because it's one of the things that, if we're coaches or occupational therapists or teachers or whatever, we're trying to impart some knowledge, and it's real simple to teach somebody how to do an exercise, how to do a sit to stand. They may not be able to do it, but it's fairly simple to explain it and such. It gets a little more complicated when you start talking about concepts, because
Exactly.
I'm from an engineering family and I've been an adapter my whole life. I mean, uh,
And so it's easier for you, but when I find in, interacting with folks, um, it's a block. It's a block to a lot of people because we don't, like I said, I don't think we really think about how to break an activity down so we can be successful. Generally, we think, well, if we can't do it, I'm out of luck, and then then it leads into, sense of failure and then not wanting to try and all that. So I think it's wonderful you're talking about it because it is crucial to regaining involvement in activity is how can I do it? How can I be successful in getting to the point? How can I be successful at each step of the way?
well,
And
I'm glad you brought up frustration because I mentioned that's one thing you don't want to do. Frustration works against motivation.
Right.
So you want to keep as much frustration out of your recovery as possible. I mentioned earlier that I wouldn't adapt. I was doing guy thinking. I wouldn't adapt anything for myself. And one thing I didn't mention was that was incredibly frustrating. And I won't give up on anything, so I continue to frustrate myself for some number of months. But and the only way I got through it, and I was thinking at the time, I was thinking, I'm really lucky I'm this stubborn, tenacious, whatever, pig-headed, whatever term you want to use for it. And I could live with pig-headed because I'm that stubborn. Anyway, that's the only way I got through it because I won't give up on anything. And I was thinking during that process, if somebody else did this, but I couldn't let go. I couldn't let go of not doing it the entire thing and trying to do it perfectly. So I only persevered because I kept at it. And like I said, you really don't want to introduce as little frustration as possible into your recovery because it's counterproductive. You know,
Right. Right. Yeah. So it's those small steps, taking those small steps um, that you can build on. So
All right, I'm going to try something different here. We're not stalled. We can keep talking on this for a long time. But, okay, I was just going to say, who's out there who's got something they're working on? Maybe we could help break it down or tell us the experience. And June, bless your heart, you raised your hand. So go.
So thank you very much for letting me mention this, but I'm a freelance writer. And so for me, getting back to typing was very important. So I started writing. I couldn't use my left hand much at all. So I did a lot of writing just with my good hand on paper. But I just found it so tediously slow. So I tried learning to type on my laptop, but the laptop is so sensitive to any movement, any drag of the fingers. So if my left hand dragged, all of a sudden I'm magnified 400 times. I've left the page and I'm on Spotify. Like it became too frustrating. So, and my energy level wasn't that good at that point. I grew fatigued quite easily. So what I came up with was I went and bought one of those breakfast trays for your bed. And so I set up my breakfast tray, put my laptop on it, got my a wireless keyboard independent of the keyboard on the laptop, and put it in my lap so my hands were down and so they could curve up so I could use the fingers more easily. And I'm now able to type without even looking at the keyboard. And you should have heard the celebration once I could stretch my left pinky to my cap key. So, and I could type for a long time just sitting in bed typing because I didn't have to sit at my desk. I could sit with my legs up and just kind of chill.
that's a perfect example.
Yeah,
That's
that's a great
good.
example. Thanks. You know
Yeah.
what? I'm gonna have to eat some of my words because when you were talking about that, I started thinking about my journey with typing. I'm also left affected. One thing I noticed was I worked at my computer a lot, so I didn't think about getting a breakfast tray and doing it in bed. But I noticed that my left hand would fall off the computer and fall off the table all the darn time. If it wasn't thinking, you probably did too. If it wasn't thinking about keeping it up there, next thing I know, it's in my lap again. So one of the things, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you about how I broke something down in my recovery while I'm just told you that I never did. So one thing I did do was even if I wasn't typing, I would try and keep that left hand up on my desk, and not necessarily on the keys, but on the laptop and on the desk, because the first part of that whole process was you can't type if your hand's in your lap, you know? So the first part of that process was to train my brain to, think about that hand. I found in the beginning, they have something left side neglect, and this is very specific. I happen to have a left side stroke. I think there is right side neglect. It's fairly rare, though. Um, I think whatever side your stroke is on, you tend to have problems neglecting that. Like, the whole problem with, my hand falling off the desk was that I'd stop thinking about it. And same thing with the mail. I used to walk out to get the mail, and I'd bring it back and hold it with my left hand. And in the beginning, I'd get halfway back, and I'd forget to keep my hand closed, and I'd drop the mail. But eventually, I'd make it in the house. So part of the thing that we're doing here is trying to focus the brain on the parts and the things that we're trying to fix. That's part of breaking it down. And so I'm taking back my words. I generally didn't break things down. I generally applied guy thinking, but the old cognitive side snuck in a few things like keep that hand up on the desk until you could. And guess what? In about a month, I didn't have any trouble with it falling off. And half the time I was training it, or more than half the time I was training it, I wasn't typing. So there's also, like if you're walking or something, we apply this in walking a lot. You mentioned this earlier, if you're having trouble with your ankle, you do ankle exercises. Um, we have no trouble thinking, oh, well, I should, just do ankle dips or something to think about the parts. So we generally don't do that with other body parts for some reason. Anyway. Thanks, June. Okay, anybody else? Anybody got any questions? Like something they're working on that they might need some help with, either in adapting and breaking it down or in exercise? We don't have to absolutely stick to the topic. No takers. Okay.
Well, I have just a question that
Sure.
I'm working on.
Perfect.
I'm back in the pool, so I'm swimming again. And I found that since I've been swimming, my my healing on my left side, which is my affected side, accelerated exponentially to everything else that I've done. Walking, hiking, cycling. And I'm wondering why. Why is swimming so good for the brain? Is there a reason for that, Lisa?
I would direct that to the doctor. Maybe he can give you a more theoretical viewpoint
I
on
really don't.
that.
I'm not the sort of doctor that helps anybody.
Well, I just thought there had to be a neurological reason because
Well,
I
in
fatigue
part, it
on
has to do with gravity. You're not fighting gravity so much when you're in the water.
Right.
Beyond that, I'm not sure.
I have a couple of potential answers. I am not a neuroscientist like Dr. Hetzler. I'm not an occupational therapist like Lisa. However, I grew up on swim teams my whole life, and I'm a big swimmer, and I've taken 8 different people to work with them in the pool on pool therapy. Let's see, Kelly, we went about 2 years. Kevin, Henry's like 6 months, and not once or twice. I had a couple people that only did a few sessions, but I had several where we did 6 months to 2 years once a week. And without a doubt, every single one of them, I saw it what was happening in the pool transferred to the land. And it transferred from the pool to the land 2, 3, 4, 5 times faster than you could ever get it to happen land on land. Does that make sense? In other words, if I took an approach where we're going to just do it all on land, I think it would take 2, 3, 4, 5 times longer than if I took you to the pool. Everything we did in the pool translated. One other reason might be is the gravity. You know, you're buoyant, so typically what we're doing is walking at about 4.5 feet, which is chest level. And I don't know what the exact math is, but I think if you're totally underwater, well, you can't walk underwater because you actually float, but you know, you get too deep, and you either need ankle weights or something to keep you down. So that's why we typically go at 4.5 feet. But so you got gravity, but the other thing about, you mentioned swimming versus walking. I was taking mostly people to the therapy pool and walking. Being a swimmer, I did some swimming myself. And one thing about swimming is that it's one of the few exercises you do that builds loose muscles. Now, I'm not a doctor. Lisa's a occupational therapist. Maybe she's got something in that she can add, but like when it builds long, loose muscles instead of short, strong, tighter muscles, is my understanding.
Hmm.
So it might, I wouldn't be surprised if swimming didn't help with spasticity. Now, there's a study for you.
There you go, yeah.
I want to get, I have a nonprofit now. I can think of 100 things that we should be studying. That's one of them. You know, we ought to be studying BDNF and how to maximize it. But another thing we ought to be studying is various things in terms of spasticity, because it's a real problem for a lot of people. So it'd be
Yeah.
very interesting, wouldn't it, to do a study where you took some people and you kept them on land and you put people in the water and you saw if maybe, you know, because you're doing a lot of, you know, when you're swimming, you're doing a lot of long,
Right,
open stuff. A stroke closes you up.
yeah.
It makes your hand want to go like that, and your foot, toe want to point down, and everything. It closes you up. It's a tightness. So maybe with swimming, it's very, very open, which is what you're trying to do when you can't open your hand, when you can't raise your arm, when you can't pick up your foot. You're trying to work against that closing down tension stroke pattern. I don't know the language. I'm not a neurologist.
Yeah,
I
it's
feel
fascinating.
that swimming, it's the, it's the same action on each side of the body. So
Mhm.
stroke on the right is identical to the stroke, well, almost identical to the stroke on the left. And
Right.
there's times when I swim, I just do distance now, where I'm not even aware I've had a stroke. It just feels that good.
Well,
Wow, that's
that's great.
cool. Yeah.
That's what we're trying to get back to. And my physical therapist said to me on day one, sorry to all of you who've heard this before, like Billy and Winnie, Ralph, we're trying to learn how to forget how to walk. I scratched my head for a minute, but what you did was you learned how to forget how to swim, in the sense that you return to the natural way where your brain doesn't really think about it. And that's what we're all trying to do.
Yeah.
I've been working on walking that way 14 and a half years, not very successfully. I walk very well. Yesterday I walked 3 miles on the beach and then all day long did 11,000 steps. So it's not that I can't walk, it's that more that I have some minor glute hip crap that I could spend an hour a day on and probably improve, but I'm busy doing this. Uh,
Yeah.
but you know, Uh, I get along. I get along fine, but I don't take very many steps without thinking about it. I'm always thinking about it. I'm always scanning, looking for. Yeah, the other night I went to listen to my cousin, and I'm walking back to the car in a gravel parking lot with potholes at night. That's difficult. I gotta scan everything, and I gotta pay attention to my foot. I've got to feel whether it's, which way it's going, because, well, I don't like to fall over. I've fallen 3 times in almost 15 years, and I think that's probably less than non-stroke survivors typically fall. But I'm
Yeah.
always on guard, and I'm envious of you, June, because at least with swimming, you got back to normal. Are you back? Do you think about it when you walk?
No, no, not really. My movement came back quite quickly. But I
Damn.
do have another question.
Sure.
I have neuropathy in my feet,
Right.
and on my right foot, the unaffected side, it's yeah, I can feel it. Feels freer than the left. Is that something that can go away?
It can go
Hmm.
away. How far out are you?
Year and a half.
Okay. I would still say there's a chance. I asked this question of a neurologist. So I have paresthesia or numbness, whatever you want to call it, on the left side of my face. It actually started here at about 3 or 4 months. It was all the way back behind my ears, and then it retreated all the way back to where it started, and it's just like here and just right here. Feels like I just came from the dentist. My lips are fat and everything. So 5 years out, I have it in my hand, paresthesia. It feels like I. You ever sit on your hand and it goes to sleep and it's all prickly? It's like at the same time it's like numb and
Yeah.
hypersensitive. Yeah, well
Mhm.
that's what mine feels like. People say, does it ever go away? Well, I asked a neurologist at 5 years, and he basically said, we don't know the answer to that. But since you're at 5 years out, the likelihood is less than if you were asking me at 6 months out. So, the longer it goes on.
Okay.
People ask this all the time because it's annoying.
Mhm.
I don't know if anybody's got it, and I don't know if anybody else can do this, but now I'm aware of my hand because I'm talking about it. But I go through and my lips are like talking to me now too because I just mentioned them. My brain's thinking about it. But I basically have trained my brain not to think about it. I go through most of the day and I don't feel the paresthesia. I've got minor neuropathy in my affected foot. I also been lately noticing I've got a little weirdness going on my right unaffected foot. I don't know if it's neuropathy or what.
Hmm.
So it's
Probably is
hard to sort it
neuropathy.
out when you get old. Go ahead, Dr. Hesley.
Yeah, just a couple of things. Now you mentioned, I think earlier on that now your stroke was on the right side of your brain, correct?
Right there.
Yeah, if you have a stroke on the right side of your brain, especially in or around the parietal lobe, which is sort of the middle of the hemisphere there, you are likely to get left side neglect. And that's where you tend not to see
Mhm.
things on the left side of your visual field. You won't see food on the left side of your plate, for example, and you may not feel anything, say in your left hand or leg. My stroke was in my right thalamus, which is below or underneath the right parietal lobe, and I had left side neglect.
Still?
Well, no,
No.
not anymore, but
Right.
I did.
Yeah.
For example, when I
Me
was
too.
still in the hospital, a doctor came in and lifted my left arm up and said, "Whose arm is this?" And I said, "My son's." I couldn't feel him lifting my arm up. My wife was in the room at the time and she recounted this to me. Um, Also, I could not see anything in my left field of vision.
Mhm.
So at one point, again, this was when I was still in the hospital, I was seated at one end of the table and all the therapists and doctors were around in a circle and I would just be talking to the ones on the right. And the ones on the left, they just told me they were raising their hand and say, "Hey, Bruce, over here, over here." And I just ignored them. I had that left side neglect. That's gone now. Like I can see Ralph over on the left side of my screen here, trying to ignore him, but that's not so easy. So it has vanished with me. But again, my stroke was subcortical. If it had been in the left parietal lobe itself, theoretically it still should resolve itself, but it would take longer.
Yeah, well, it typically does resolve itself. It's pretty simple. You just do things that focus your attention over there. Like they told me, to have everybody I talked to sit on my left, so I was forced
Sure.
to pay attention.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen, you see the drawings with the, clock and, goes 12,
Oh, yeah.
3, 4, 5, 6, 11's right at the bottom,
Right.
nothing on the left. Or you see a picture of somebody who ate half of their dinner and left the rest.
Yeah.
I actually was in the hospital room with a guy who I built a set of parallel bars for, had terrible stroke, and he had left side neglect. He was a big eater. And he was eating his dinner. We were visiting. I was helping him and his family. We were all visiting. They brought him his food, and he ate the dinner. And he said, "I'm still hungry." And so we all said, "Well, actually, I think I grabbed his plate and rotated it around and said, 'Go ahead and eat the other half then.'" But I actually saw a picture, live, like that looks like the pictures you search on Google when you search left
Sure.
side neglect.
Oh, yeah, I think I mentioned last week, before I could return to teaching, I had to take an 8-hour neuropsychological test to show I had the cognitive abilities. And one of the things they had me do was draw a clock, and I did it perfectly, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. But there are classic figures in neurology textbooks that show 1 through 12 all on one side
Oh yeah,
of the dial, and the other
right.
side is blank.
Oh yeah, I've seen it. Actually, I like butterflies, and I had somebody who she was 3 or 4 years out still. She didn't have it so much in life, but she had it like, in terms of interacting with people, but she had it when she drew. And she drew me a butterfly, and the left wing is completely different than the right wing. And
Wow.
she gave me, I said, "I love it," because, who wouldn't love somebody to make a drawing for you?
Sure.
Um, I said, "Do the wings look the same to you?" And she said, "Yes." And I said, "Okay." I didn't say that they're not, but so she saw it as symmetrical, and it's not. So anyway,
It's
Molly, we're looking
fascinating.
at you again instead of your legs. Anyway, got
I have to leave the meeting, but thank you very much for having this meeting, Ralph, and for being here, Lisa. And thank you for answering the questions and all the input.
well, thank you for sharing your experience
Yeah.
and having questions. Because well, a lot of people are reluctant to talk in these meetings, I think. So we, we like interactivity for a number of reasons.
Well, great. Now, what's happening on Thursday? Is it the same Zoom link?
Thursday, it's Friday. We have a breath class on
Oh,
Fridays
right.
at 11. It's the same link. Everything I do is my Zoom account with the word stroke in lowercase. So yeah, but I can't get people to understand that. So they go like, "Well, I didn't see the link," and it's back. Hey, guess what, Lisa? It's back to exactly what we're talking about. Okay, so
Well, I'll see you all soon. Thank
okay,
you
June.
so much.
All right, bye.
So I use the same link every week, but every week I get 3 or 4 people who go, "I couldn't find the link," and that stops them. That's exactly
Right.
what we're talking about. Maybe I haven't made that clear. I don't know. This is a difficult thing because I get people all the time. Oh yeah, well the most famous one I get, or a simple example, is about 3 or 4 weeks ago. Somebody said they were looking for a stroke coach, and about 8 people in Stroke Buddy said, "Well, you're in a group owned by one." Uh, I don't know what people think about me or know what I do. All the time people are going, "I didn't know you had a YouTube channel." And then, like this morning, I sent it to somebody and they said, "Well, I already follow you, but it's not helping." So I said, "Well, let me know what your specific problem is, and maybe I can give you some more specific exercises than looking at
Right.
22 walking exercises and trying to figure out what to do." I need to make a couple of videos on like walking better and ankles. I have these playlists, but what I need is an overview video. Lisa, you understand this because you can hand people the whatever to the sheets at the end of therapy, but they don't do you a lot of good if you haven't spent time with a therapist who's explained to you how this the good that it does you, how it fits into your program, exactly how to do it.
Exactly.
When I
Right.
ever get exercise, this is just a tip for everybody else. This is what I do. You don't have to do it, but it works. Okay, so I'll ask for homework. That's a whole nother discussion, getting the most out of your therapist. I'll ask for homework. I'll ask them to do it for me because I learn visually. Once I watch them do it, generally I can do it. So then I do it for them after I watch them do it. I do it 1, 2, 3 times, depending on how I feel about it. And I go, do I have it down? And they go, yes, you got it. Then additionally, when I come home, I do it about 5 or 10 times so that I can immediately kind of have pattern my
Right.
brain so I don't forget it. And then like 2 days later on Wednesday, I'm going, what was that? And you look at the sheet and but that's because I'm a visual learner. So I insist on seeing it, doing it, and then I reinforce it when I get home. And I'm sure everybody out there is going, I know she gave me more exercise or he gave me more exercises than this, but I can't remember them.
Right. Right.
One thing you can do is ask for the sheets because there's a sheet on everything. Most therapists can print those. What is it? Keep to share. It's got a 2 in the middle. Anyway, a lot of people use that.
Tap to go. HEP to go.
That's it. HEP to go. Right. They're real good. And Paul, you and I just maybe you made me aware of it, or maybe I discovered it, or maybe some of both. They actually have videos of a lot of the exercises, which
Yes.
I really like because even though I'm a visual learner, I would rather see a video than a couple of black and white still shots.
Right. Yeah.
Because they don't always fully explain to me how you get from here to here. In a video, got all the frames in between. So it's just a lot easier.
I wanted to tell Dr. Hetzler that I'm a right thalamic hemorrhage and had really significant left neglect. And when I had to do the neuropsych testing too, and they had a criticism of my clock I had the numbers correct and I had the hands, but I was trying to draw like little filigree hands like you see on the little clocks that you used to have in your kitchen. And my my hour hand wasn't short enough. So there wasn't enough difference between the hour and minute hand for them.
Oh,
I got a kitchen.
That's getting awfully picky.
Yeah, I was picky because I got a kitchen clock that's got like the hour hand is about 3.5 inches long, and the minute hand, and the hour hand's about 3 1/4. There's only a 1/4 inch difference between them. So some clocks come like that. That's a case where you got in trouble because you were doing more than they asked for, which I really hate because I'm subject to doing that.
I was enjoying it.
I know.
I was enjoying it.
I completely understand because I'm the same way. I'm going to go, my whole thing is, wait till you see this clock I'm going to draw for you, and, but the danger there is, you can get criticized for something. I mean, that was extra credit. I mean, that should be an extra credit item, not part of the basics,
Yeah, the key is the numbers.
Yeah, the key is the numbers.
The hands are somewhat irrelevant.
Yeah.
That's funny.
You had 2 hands, I'd be good with that, one should be a little shorter. But, the other thing is, whoever looked at a clock with it, suppose the hands were the same. You wouldn't look at a clock at 12:10 and say it was 2.
Oh, after sitting in that emergency room on Sunday night, you had no idea what time it was. You needed to have the hands on the clock different.
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying we often use cognitive stuff, if it's 12:25, it's lunchtime and you haven't eaten lunch yet, it's not 5 o'clock.
Right.
Right.
Anyway, Anybody else? Mandy, it's good to see you back. We'll see you when you
Yeah.
make it, I guess. Um, Anybody else got any kind of questions or
I
anything?
have a quick question.
Okay.
Um, my left arm is like I can raise it, but I cannot put it down completely by itself. And the doctor said, like, it's gravity, so I have to fight gravity. Is that true?
Yeah, so in other words, what Lisa's the occupational therapist, but let me understand this. Um, so you can get it up, but when you go to bring it down, it wants to drop.
Yes.
Okay, well, that's a lot like my arm. In the beginning, I did curls because when I want to do a curl, I got it right about here, bam, it just go down.
Yeah.
And I found that I actually had little, this would be interesting to confirm with you, Lisa, because this is one of my like made up adaptive kind of theories. So
Mhm.
I did a lot of nice slow curls because it's really, in most exercises, about the down or the control. You know, you can jerk that arm up with the weight in it doing a curl,
Mhm.
but you can't jerk it down when you go to let down because you want a nice slow down. And I found I had, like, right where that drop off point was, I had a
Mhm.
bump there. And what I would do would be I'd do curls, but then I'd also do them like really short curls, just work over and over and over again over
Mhm.
that bump until I got it smooth. And that's, here we go, we're breaking it down again.
Right.
I did do breaking down, I just didn't think about it.
That's it. You don't think about it, but
Well,
you,
but I also didn't allow myself in certain situations. I remember putting the whole cognitive overlay on it. This is cheating, I got to do it right. But so there, I got the bump worked out nice and smooth, and then I went back to the full curls, and guess what? The bump wasn't there anymore. So,
yeah.
um,
So for Winnie, hey, it's good to
yeah,
see you. But one thing you could do is when you're laying in bed on your back,
yep,
is hold that arm toward the ceiling. And can you do that and
Yes.
have control of it? And
Yes.
then slowly make some bigger circles. And then even you can do like the alphabet and you can get bigger and bigger. So you're building up those shoulder muscles so that you'll be able to eventually, bring it down slowly without it dropping. But that's what I would do. I'd lay in the bed, do some big letters, big circles or big letters, ABC, moving that shoulder. And that should build up those muscles till you have more control.
I
Okay.
really liked circles. I drew them with my index finger by my side to get my shoulder moving again. I think and they were jerky in the beginning. When you can get a nice smooth circle, then your brain's talking to all the muscles and doing the whole thing where it's, you know, we don't realize how complex what the muscles are doing for us to do simple things. Something like drawing a circle can use like every muscle in your shoulder. And the one thing
But
that's
also drawing a circle with your arm hanging down will help prevent adhesions developing in your shoulder.
right. Well, I
So,
broke my shoulder in accident. I was training for a triathlon bike accident. A woman pulled out in front of me and I T-boned her at 25 miles an hour. It was not fun or pretty. Um, So I learned that, and I healed my shoulder in a couple weeks doing circles. The orthopedic doctor said, I said to him, "What should I be able to do?" He said, "Take your right hand." Of course, it's my left hand. Everything, in my life has happened on my left side, and I had a stroke on the left side. He said, "Take your left hand, a right hand, and put it on the back of your neck like that." I said, "Like that?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "That's what you should be able to do with your other hand." And I said, "Okay. I'll see you in 3 weeks and I'll do that." And he said to me, "No, you won't." And I said, "Yes, I will." And I went back in and I did it for him in 3 weeks. And he said, "How did you do that?" I said, "I did an hour of circles every day. I was training for a triathlon. I was be at the Y at 4:59 for them to open the doors. And, so I got up and I did only an hour. I mean, that was easy. But circles I like because, and it's well known on the bed. You can also like lay on the bed and like make a snow angel on that one side. But Lisa's talking about having it come straight up.
Toward the ceiling, yeah.
And if you need to in the beginning, don't draw them too big.
Mm-hmm.
The further out you get, the more work you're going to be doing, and that's the point of it. That's why she said keep going bigger and bigger and even draw the alphabet. Drawing the alphabet is another thing like circles. I recommend it for ankles because, you know, it's one of those things where you're almost integrating life into it. Okay, in life we have all these complex movements, and before a stroke, our muscles, do all the right things. Because,
Right.
like when you're doing a curl, your biceps and triceps are working. One's going up and the other's going down. If you looked at the energy level you're putting in, there'd be a crisscross. As one lets go, one's controlling it from falling, and the other one's pulling it down at the same time. So it's one of the things that stroke survivors I found is it's really hard to get back some of those real complex motions that use a lot of the muscles, and I think circles. And don't be surprised if your circles are jerky in the beginning too. I drew triangles in the beginning because I could only hit like 3 points. And then I drew kind of squares and pentagons, and I worked my way towards circles. You get up to dodecagons, you're getting pretty close. But anyway, uh, uh,
Ralph,
yeah,
something you mentioned is pretty much the surgery I'm going to have when you were talking about the balance of forces for the muscles.
right. That's what the
And
surgery does.
right now, with the spasticity I have, the nerves are constantly firing. They are always sending a signal to the muscles to fire. And it's like that signal's on 10, on maximum. And that's why your hand goes in a fist, because the flexors in the hand are stronger than the extensors. But to use your example, and what's happening in surgery is after a stroke, it's very common to have the elbow flexed. And that's because the biceps muscle is much stronger than the triceps muscle. So in the surgery, he's going to go in and he's going to do hyperselective neurectomy, which is his microsurgery, going in and tracing the nerve and cutting selected branches of the nerve to kind of turn down the signal to restore a balance between the two muscles.
Right.
Wow.
Have you talked to anyone that's had that surgery done on them?
Oh, yeah.
About a half dozen people, yes.
And they're pleased with the results?
Oh, everyone says, listen, he's the best, and it's a miracle. And Dr. Hetzler, I can send you videos of the surgery. I can send you the patient profiles. I can send you a lot of information about it.
Okay, I was just wondering,
if you don't
I'm
know
not interested
Polly,
in it myself, but I was just, for your sake, because a surgery like that is pretty much permanent. And I'm wondering how people that had that done feel like 6 months later. They think it was really beneficial.
They wish they'd done it. They wish they'd done it 6 months sooner. It's
Oh, okay, sure.
for anybody who,
this is
go ahead.
this is Peter Ree at the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota.
Okay.
That's what I was getting ready to say. For anybody who doesn't know Polly, she does more research than I do. She does more research into the things she's interested in, particularly the things that affect her and her recovery, than anybody I know. I met Polly over spasticity, where I was being basically not a jerk, uninformed. How about that, Polly? And
There you go.
Polly taught me a little bit about spasticity on a level that I didn't experience it. I overcame my spasticity, so that's my experience. So I didn't understand well, it's not that I didn't understand. I didn't have experience that would let me relate to people who couldn't or hadn't yet overcome their spasticity. So, Polly, without mansplaining it to me, thank you very much, Polly, for that. She educated me about spasticity. In fact, I went and met her in person, went to a 2 hour therapy session of hers, and learned a lot. And I'll have to tell you, Polly, that every time spasticity comes up, I now have this little thing that makes me think about, even though you didn't experience it, Ralph, there are people out there that didn't have your experience in getting rid of it. And I think, Polly, so I think about you and spasticity a couple times a week, when it comes up, because there are people with spasticity that is difficult to overcome, or maybe not able to be overcome. I don't know medically. I'm not a neurologist. Might be a good question to ask Paul. Dr. Mark McDonald. I've got him coming on.
Yes,
He's going to talk
great.
to us once about his journey to Centrillo and what they're trying to do, but I don't want to confuse that. I'm willing to let him do that, but what I really want to have him come on is as a neurologist and stroke expert. And, he can't prescribe, but we've gotten around this before well, Lisa's an OT. She's not going to tell you something specific. Well, not anything more than, draw circles or something, because there's an ethical dilemma. You're not supposed to prescribe to people you don't see, feel, and touch in a medical visit. So anyway, it might be a good question to ask Dr. McDonald. I haven't had a neurologist. Sorry.
Lisa,
Yeah.
Dr. McDonald is a fellow Virginian.
Oh, is he?
He's
Out
a
of
teacher
where?
in Charlottesville.
Okay. Yeah. Now, where are you located, Polly?
Richmond.
Oh, Richmond. Okay. Yeah. And
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and you are one I've learned a lot from too, just in, dealing with survivors and various issues that, I haven't necessarily been aware of. So you've been a real advocate for folks as well. And I respect that.
And I
Polly,
wanted to say that I really, like Ralph, I thought, and I'd let you know that the weight support for the arm, the DIY, that I thought that was
Oh.
wonderful as well.
Oh, good.
right.
Thank
No, I mean,
you.
that's Polly. I bet you're an adapter. I know you well enough to
Yeah.
know that you probably are. And Polly's blessed to live near Sheltering Arms. When I visited her there, that's one heck of a facility. But more than having all the toys, and they do have all the toys, they have a lot of really skilled therapists, and they've got a kind of a, I don't know, what would you say, Polly, a can-do attitude about the whole thing? There's a certain positivity there I've been to a number of, not like 100 or anything, but I've been to 15 or 20 PT places. I've taken stroke survivors to them and such. And that place had a real positive vibe about it. Talk about can-do attitude. Everybody knew how to hook you up to the E-stem bike. I know you know the name of it, and I don't. And somebody got called away, and somebody else came over 30 seconds later, and I asked Paul, and she said, "Oh no, they all know how to hook it up." But somebody came over, saw that she was, stopped for a minute, and they took over and hooked her up, and off she went. So everybody should have Sheltering Arms near them, but they don't. It would be, to me, I would like to see all the facilities have that level of equipment, expertise, and attitude. And I don't know which of the three, those are kind of equal. Expertise and attitude are probably more important than equipment, because guess what? That's what we're talking about here, adapting. I got better without anything. I went to PT. They had me walk on half round styrofoam and do some stuff on the parallel bars. They didn't have a lot of gear. I didn't have any gear at home, and I didn't use any gear other than chip clips, rubber bands, hammers, washing dishes, stuff like that. Therapy's all around you in terms
Right.
of breaking it down. Like I just said, washing dishes. When I first started washing dishes, I couldn't put them away with my left hand. I worked for a while on just holding the darn, picking them up and holding them and scrubbing them with the other hand. Then I worked on like turning them over and passing. Then I noticed, oh, you're passing it over to your right hand to put it over to the dish drainer on the left. No, 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 no. Before your stroke, you would have used the left hand. So I started working on that. So,
Yeah.
therapy's all around us. You don't need
Right.
like the $1 zillion stuff. If you have access to it, great. I'm not anti-device. It's not that I get not accused, but people think I'm anti-device because I'm trying to teach people that you don't need the devices. It's another way people get stuck. They think they have to have this or that because they see it in a video or they see somebody in a group who got better doing this. Well, you had a different stroke. It might work for you. Sure, check it out. But don't, so many people like wait. I see this all the time. I'm getting my Bionus L300 next month. And I'm thinking, what are you going to do for 28 days till it comes in, Because you can always get better even without it. So many people don't, drop what they're doing. And there's magic bullet chasers. They're the worst of this group. And it doesn't, I see it. It doesn't matter to me. I recovered. I'm doing good. I'm trying to spread information, but it bothers me that people let themselves get hung up. So that's why we had this meeting, and that's why I often comment. I have to figure out how to say it in a nice way that they'll understand it, because you can't put a comment like, well, you're a dumbass, you ought to be doing this, because, they tuned you out when they read the word dumbass. And it's rude, and I've got a position to maintain. So, but you always have to think about, Lisa, I'm sure you deal with this. You've got to think about couching your answer, your advice in a way that the person you're working with is going to understand it and find it acceptable. And
Exactly. Yeah.
so they do it,
Yeah. Yeah. It's true.
All right. Anybody else before we let Lisa go and close this out? No takers, Lisa.
Okay. Well, it was wonderful seeing y'all and getting the
Thank you for
chance to
coming.
talk with you.
Well,
So,
we really appreciate you taking your time to do this, and know you've started. You're wearing 2 or 3 hats now instead.
yeah. Yeah.
And so, Lisa took some kind of occupational therapy job in addition to her coaching and her YouTube channel. She has a real useful YouTube channel. And anybody wants to get in touch with her, I always put all the contact information, links, and things like that. I think you said you were working on a standing balance video today?
Yeah, I think yes, just working on basic standing and how to progress it and include your daily activities while you're doing it so you can address the balance and do something purposeful. So, yeah, we'll see. That's my plan. We'll see how it turns out.
Well, I'm sure
But
it'll turn out great. It'll be really useful to a lot of people. And by the way, before we sign off, I love that. I don't know if it was a video grab still or somebody took a still picture. I love that picture of you like 3/4 asleep where you labeled it. Are you bored with your
with the
current
therapy,
exercise program? It's a great,
yeah.
great photograph. And that's another concept. Mix it up. I think that's the
Right,
point
yeah,
of that video is, you get bored when you do the same thing. Your brain also gets bored.
right.
And when
And
you
actually, that video was really looking at adapting leisure activities that you enjoy and how to use them in your recovery, and taking them at a very basic step and then working up toward, completing the leisure activity. So yeah, the adaptation is all around you. You just break it
right,
down and,
like
um,
therapies. So the one takeaway from all this is You know more, you don't have to be an engineer. You probably know more about adapting than you think.
Yeah.
I discovered 2 or 3 things that I did in my recovery after that were adapting after I told you I refused to do it because I was being a dumb guy, applying guy thinking. So you know more about it than you think. You don't have to
Yes.
be an engineer. It's really a mindset of not getting blocked, not allowing yourself
Mhm.
to see things as things that stop you. I
Mhm.
see every problem as an opportunity to create a solution. I've done that before I started coaching. It could be argued that, well, what I'm doing now, of course, that's what it is, because I figure out all kinds of stuff for other people. Anybody who saw my recent "Put Your Pants On After You Sit in the Toilet" video knows that. So, the point is, don't let yourself run into brick walls. Every problem's an opportunity to create a solution. And if you can have that kind of mindset, you're going to keep moving forward with your recovery.
Yeah, and well said.
So, all right. Well, thanks you again, Lisa. And we'll
A
see
pleasure.
a lot of you next week. And everybody's welcome all the time, of course. And so that's it for this week.
Thank you.
All right. Bye, y'all. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.